Sounds
This
good. Thanks, Michael.
conference will now be recorded.
All right, very good. Well, so with that being said, I'd say let's do this. So, Michael, I was going to see if you would be willing to kind of give an overview for the group on the upcoming summit in November, just so everybody's aware of the details on what's going on. We did submit for our group a submission for the panel for a panel discussion on our guidelines that we're developing now. So obviously we're going to have to make some fairly significant progress forward before that'll really make sense. But at least at this point, we kind of have that submission requested. But anyway, if Michael, if you're willing, to provide an overview, that'd be good, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not the right person from OCP to do that, but I can definitely try and fill in some gaps with some basic info. Yeah, so we're excited about the summit this year. Right now we are planning on a in-person summit. We're going to have plenty of mask, social distancing, and some other safety protocols to make sure that everyone is safe. There is a hybrid component to this event in that we are offering some virtual access that we haven't offered before. However, if you do decide to attend virtually, unfortunately, you're not going to have the full experience. I believe that on the OCP website, it kind of talks about the differences between, the different levels of passes. There's going to be, the regular in-person. We'll have a virtual all access ticket, and then a virtual limited, which is free. So I'm just going to drop a link to the registration page there so you guys can take a look at it. And actually, it would make more sense for me to share my screen. So as you're thinking of, can I travel? What will my company allow? What am I comfortable with? There are still ways to be involved with the summit, even if you're not able to be there in person. The virtual all access does get you access to the engineering workshops, keynotes, to be able to chat with people in virtual booths, things of that nature. Obviously, you don't get your food and beverage if you're virtual. And then there's the virtual limited, which is free, and that's just access to more of our sponsored content there. So if you are living overseas, can't travel or aren't allowed to travel, I would explore these options here. From a content standpoint, Scott or Bob, sorry, you guys mentioned that you have made a couple submissions. The project leads and incubation committee, all the track chairs are going through those right now. We have about a 2-week period where those are being selected. The folks who made the submissions will be notified, of whether their talk was accepted or rejected. Hopefully, for you guys, it definitely makes sense to have that talk be accepted, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And then there are some deadlines with content in terms of when we need slides available. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, I am definitely the wrong person to talk to about that, but maybe for the September call, I'll ask Kaylee or Kate, our event folks, to be on, and they will be much better at whether you guys know when those deadlines are for that. That's about all I can do from a summit standpoint. In terms of the contributions that may need to be made prior to summit, that's more my my area. So if you have any questions about that or any general questions about summit, I'll do my best to answer those now.
No, sounds good, Michael. Thanks. With the one that I submitted, I kind of wasn't really sure, if from a travel standpoint, if how many people would be able to get there. If we do find that travel is not an option, is it possible to conduct the panel discussion virtually, or is that only from a presentation standpoint? Is that something that can only be done in person?
So yeah, we've talked about ways to do that. Right now, we don't have the capability to do an interactive discussion virtually, where the room will have audio and can ask you questions. I believe we are hoping to be able to do pre-recorded sessions. Now, obviously, that's not that attractive of an option. No one wants to go to a conference, sit in a room, and watch a recording. But if there are instances where a talk was accepted and then for unforeseen circumstances the speaker isn't able to travel, I think that's our plan. But your speaker manager folks from F&Tech, which is our production company, will be in touch about stuff like that if you're not able to travel.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thanks for that. I appreciate the update. Yeah, any questions from anybody else for Michael?
And I just looked in our
okay.
speaker management tool, and I believe this was the talk that you guys were discussing, right? The OCP Ready guidelines.
Yes, that's it.
So it looks like just about everyone loves the talk who's been reviewing it. So I would say that's pretty much a lock there, which is good.
Sounds good. Sweet. Very good. Well, and just I'll open it up to the rest of the group. If there is interest from anyone in being part of the panel for this discussion, if you feel like you can travel and you feel like this would be something that you'd be interested in doing, then please let me know because we certainly could use as much support from the group as we can get. So.
That's about. I'm probably interested in that. I need to see how that's going to work out with I get some new responsibilities lately, so that may conflict a bit, but I'll check into that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we will check into that as well. From my side, maybe the CEO is going to be able to do that. We're going to be on the Global Summit.
Excellent.
Yeah, this year it's still difficult with the travel because especially from Europe coming into North America, there are so many restrictions, and now they ask the sanitary pass, and it's just could be a risk for getting quarantined. My personal decision not to come was based on this. I would have come 100% otherwise, but I decided to pass this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. It's a very significant risk, and particularly at this point, in some instances, it's probably not really worth it. So.
Yeah, it's a difficult decision for sure, and we'll see how it goes afterwards. But so far, it's been tough.
All right, very good, guys. So yeah, think about that some more, and let me know if there's interest there, and what we can do if there's interest. That we have the ability to within that submission to include who it is that will be our speaker panel, and so whoever we choose. There is you have to register for an ID and within this management system that OCP is using, and once you register, then we can add you in as a speaker for that, and then you'll start getting all the communications and information directly from the management company. So yeah, the sooner as far as getting that identified is probably sooner the better.
Hey Scott, I'm planning on heading out there. And I'll help any way I can, whether it's speaking or just logistics on our end.
Is that Rich?
Yeah.
Hey Rich, that sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Yeah, it'd be great to have you on there. And if you want to get registered on the system, if you haven't got the information on that, let me know and I'll send that to you. And I'll probably just try to send that out to the entire group, make sure everybody's got that, and we'll get you added in there.
That sounds good. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. So let's see. So the our next topic was actually talking about the guideline. Has anybody had a chance to spend any time actually working on the guideline itself?
So Bob, I did my typical thing of I was going to work on it this week and I got busy with other things and I didn't. So I did have a chance to look through the requirements matrix. So that was one of the conversations we had prior was, I don't remember exactly who recommended, but it said we should go look at the requirements matrix because that's going to allow the specifications for the electrical cooling gives some guidelines for the for a colo facility in terms of acceptable parameters and optimal parameters and those sort of things. So I did look through that, and just I think this is in relationship to the cooling specifically. And it's interesting is it does just kind of focus on the airflow of the rack, aisle spacing, density, inlet conditions, basically to per ASHRAE standards. So it's pretty basic in terms of not getting to different cooling methodologies other than air cooled. And that's it. So it's not talking about chill water, DX, or any of the different solutions out there. It's just talking about how to support the rack itself, which makes sense because that's the intent of the OCP ready requirement, is to make sure that the colos are ready to receive a OCP rack. In terms of modifying that to meet modular, right now there's not a lot of things I would change about it. There's a few things. So there's a few minor items that I think we probably need to update per the MDC requirements, but not tremendously different. But I mentioned it earlier before we started here because I know there's some interest in getting the liquid cooling at least attached to this or mentioned here. But we'll probably need that team to look through both the document and the matrix to see what makes sense, because when I look at this, generally speaking, again, it's not getting into cooling methodologies or types. It's talking about how to manage air cooling for an OCP rack. So that's where, if there's a desire to have different cooling solutions included, I definitely recommend that people take a look at both the document and the matrix to see what would make sense to add to that. And I think, again, if we're going to modify that, it makes sense to potentially make the same suggestions to the co-location version of this, because I think those things would be one and the same in terms of whatever requirements we would look at from a rack perspective. We would also look at in terms of how that rack goes into a modular solution versus a stick-built colo. The cooling requirements would essentially be the same, at least in terms of the way the document's written.
So happy to support from my side.
Okay, and so if you, Bob, the link that you provided in the notes will take you to the document itself, the MDC guidelines document that we're currently modifying. So if anybody opens that up, they'll see Mark Dancy and I have made some comments. What I think what we might want to add is here. Let me just copy this and put it in the notes. So that link that I just put in the notes is the link to the folder that has that MDC guidelines and the OCP ready requirements matrix that Mark uploaded. And I believe since that has been labeled the MDC requirements matrix, it's no longer the colo requirements matrix. So I believe we can modify that as needed. So anyway, so that link, you might want to put that in the notes, Bob, and say this is the folder that has both the MDC guidelines document and the MDC requirements matrix. Those are the two documents in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Whether or not people aren't stuck going directly to the guidelines document and can't see the requirements.
Right, and just here, I'll just share real quickly because I've got that up. So the matrix, oops, is this loading? And this is a bit of an eye chart, so let's see, let me get the. But the document references the matrix, and you'll see that as I'm trying to zoom in here to get this bigger. but it breaks it up in terms of building access, ramps, lift, elevators. Again, for a colo facility, that's what this was originally written for, so we need to modify that. But then it gets into the electrical requirements. And as I mentioned, this first column is the acceptable column. Whoops, first one's acceptable, the second one is optimal. And then again, the cooling, it's just short section. Again, it's just talking about airflow of rack. So this is the part I've been talking about, is that the document references the technical details in the matrix. So we'll need to update both of them, but definitely I take a look at this and see if anybody has any concerns or comments on that cooling section. As far as power goes, I want to make some comments about the voltage. The voltage is referencing as a acceptable 120 volt, which I believe in most cases that's not going to be acceptable. It's going to be either 208 or 400 volt. So I think we need to change that, but that's a different topic altogether. But anyway, I just wanted to pull that up just so everybody's aware, and then again, if that's the place where I think we need the most effort at this point.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Don Mitchell here, and I'm posting the concept of integration of liquids into modular data centers. The Advanced Cooling Facilities has been looking at the integration of liquids into traditional data center, well, into an air-cooled data center. A couple aspects of that. I'm not sure if there's overlap on some of the messaging that we're putting out that might align with the modular data center. And the other thing is we have work streams that I very much would like to rationalize and create into papers, white papers by sometime in September. Getting anybody to review, comment. I'd be more than happy to list you as contributors just for saying I read it, liked it, read it, didn't like it, here's the changes or something like that. And then I also somehow seem at the moment to be having a problem getting into the documents that you linked. So you might have just seen a couple requests from me for that. So I may not be actually a member of the group. I'll go in and see if I can add myself to the group. That's all.
Okay.
Any comments about what I just said?
Don, I didn't hear the first part of your speech because everything froze. I heard a little bit towards the end of what you said.
Yeah, I probably should call in versus use my internet. I've been having some issues with that. Let me try it again. The Advanced Cooling Facilities Group, which is part of DCF, has been looking at adding as two white papers or work streams on adding liquid to traditional data centers. And one deals on connection formats and other deals on reference designs. There may be content that would be, at the very least, content should parallel those discussions as they are applied to MDC. We shouldn't have necessarily two different philosophies, if you will. And then, so to that extent, I would like to see if there is any overlap or integration potential. And we are trying to create these work streams into a white paper, and I would greatly value any critique or editing from anybody on these work streams. And I was just posting one of them on the notes, and I can add another one. Did that come through any better sound-wise?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Heard you clear.
Is that a line? Is there any discussion that wants to be on that? I don't want to derail this discussion, but it seemed like that I jumped in right about the same time as someone was talking about something that aligned with what we're doing.
Don, one question. So this document is created for transition from air to liquid, right?
Well, that's the foundation of what we tried to bite off a small chunk. And what we looked at is most data centers were starting out as air cooled, but looking at adding liquid in the future. That having been said, there's nothing that says you have to use the guidance with adapting. It's just mostly looking at different scenarios and reference designs to help with that.
Okay.
How that would line up with the modular data center, I need to take a look at your document closer to see if there's any practices that we could have. There's two work streams. I said one is trying to standardize the connection format, and that would include having vendors provide BIM documentation with sufficient resolution, but not too excessive resolution to enable just placement and geometry. And that's one example. There's also certain efforts to try to standardize the connection format to minimize the number of adapters that are needed to go from a one type of rear door heat exchanger to another type of rear door heat exchanger, or one type of immersion tank to another type of immersion tank. And that document seems like it would have commonality with goals of the modular data center, that you would want to, especially in a modular data center where space is even more at a premium, you'd kind of like to standardize on how you could swap out or bring in different liquid cooled IT. So that that paper on connections seems like it would have a lot of overlap. The one on reference designs has some overlap, and we could talk about that in a call dedicated to this discussion. I don't want to hijack this call.
Well, it's a good point, because it's something that has come up frequently in the past, and we haven't gotten resolution. And so that's why I was kind of encouraging to look at the documents, because I think what you'll find is with the MDC ready and Colo ready documents, is that it's pretty basic. It doesn't really get into cooling methodologies for data centers. The intent of the document is to prepare, the original intent with the document was to prepare a colo for how to handle an OCP rack, right? That's how the document was written. Now what we're looking at is how to prepare MDC for an OCP rack or an OCP deployment. So the current OCP racks, I don't believe, have provisions or have any standards written for liquid cooling. Is that fair to say?
As far as I know, that's correct. Now, there's also there's 3 sub projects, as we all know, that look at door heat exchangers, at cold plate and immersion, and they are trying to come up with what will be the OCP standards for those specific products. ACF is looking at guidance that would enable simple integration of those products into data centers, be it modular or traditional. And some simple little things, if I were to take off the top of my head, trying to standardize on the native thread type that is used by, say, all door heat exchangers would be a great thing. If everyone used the same type of thread, because they're pretty much all either 1 inch or 1 1/4 inch. There's no reason why one should be BSVP and the other one be NPT. They pretty much all, and I don't want to go too far on that topic. The other is providing BIM documentation makes it easy to do layouts, and would greatly enable thing. And we are encouraging all vendors, and I think Schneider is taking some leadership in this area, as is Vertiv is taking leadership in this area, to provide their liquid cooled IT assets with a BIM content that makes it easy to do a layout and to see how everything fits. And then the third discussion that may tie into this, we're just touching into, is maintenance requirements associated with liquid cooled ITE, and maintenance access, which could include, and I don't know, in a modular data center, if people see that you're going to do, say, a swap out on a live module, or if you take the module entirely offline to do swap out.
Right.
So those are discussions.
Don, but I feel what you're getting into is the details of all the different things that you're currently working on, but the current OCP rack until that OCP rack standard has been updated to include the next level of cooling or next level of solutions that are available. The OCP ready document that we're creating for MDC, it's going to be difficult for us to get into those things that are currently being developed and put into the standard. I believe where we're at today, unfortunately, is we'll have to write the standard based off what's available within the other standards and reference those. We can make reference to this is in development and see those groups for more details, but that's where I feel like until we get the next step of the OCP rack and the cooling methodologies for that, or from the data center, since we're a subset of that facility group, and this is where I feel like Mark had give this direction as well, is that right now at the base level, let's just get the document done for MDC based off the OCP rack as it is today. We can definitely look at other cooling methodologies, but since those are all being developed in other groups, where we're at right now with the standard, since it's not done, we'll just keep running ourselves in circles trying to
that's fine.
catch up to the other.
So let me jump in real quick with an ignorant question, and because I haven't read your documentation. You'd mentioned something about when I joined just a couple minutes ago, and you mentioned the issue of liquid cooling in data centers. And so is the current MDC solutions only looking at air cooled? Is it looking at any kind of a door heat exchanger attached to a OCP rack? Or what's the max densities you're trying to work with on these MDCs?
Yeah, so that was the point of why I brought up that matrix earlier.
Yeah, so I was trying to get to that and I couldn't.
Okay, so the matrix outlines the current OCP rack requirements in terms of what's acceptable and what's optimal. And so that's probably a bit behind in terms of where the market is at the moment, but not necessarily what the standards are. So since we're modifying the colo ready document to make it match or to make a MDC version of it, we're more or less working off the same parameters. And so I'll share that real quickly. But this is where I like the idea of kind of thinking ahead and let's look at all the different things. But the more you look at sorry, I'm going to look at a completely different thing up here. Trying to get my screens associated properly. So this requirements matrix has a cooling section. And if you can see it, that's right here. And This is pretty basic, right? It's not getting into any technologies or anything. It's basically saying, okay, here's for an OCP rack, airflow is front to back. The acceptable parameters are we have some sort of containment. Optimal parameter is hot aisle containment or chimney. I'd argue that this is optimal, but it's a different discussion. Rack density is 8 kilowatts or 12 kilowatts. Aisle widths, right? So it's pretty basic. So this, again, you look at from an MDC perspective, so this is currently the colo requirements, even though it says MDC, they just changed the title because this is the one we can go modify. This is what they're starting with.
Okay. So, and that's a great, I appreciate it. I probably got too far into this. I need to check with the different project leads on where they at on getting a OCP standard for their application. I would think that, for example, the door heat exchanger group should have something. It's not that hard to go from an OCP rack to an OCP rack with a door heat exchanger on it.
Well, and so that's the thing is within this, we can reference other standards and other groups and say, okay, well, if you have this situation, or if you have a higher density that you need to cool, then reference this standard or reference this group, right? So, and we can pull that information in here, but and then so I've got this, and then this is the document, and again, it references the matrix. So this is what Mark was trying to explain to me before, is that, okay, well, we are currently working on the OCP rec standard as it is today, and helping facility operators and MDC manufacturers and designers manage the OCP rec as is today, with all from electrical and cooling perspective. So that's the way this document is currently set up. And again, the goal of this team is just to modify the Colo version to be the MDC version.
So I guess my question is whether or not does attaching a door heat exchanger change the nature of an OCP rack, or is an OCP rack still an OCP rack with a door heat exchanger on the backside?
Yeah, so I think that, again, that's an option. So that's why what I was suggesting is, from a cooling perspective, in terms of getting feedback, that's why I encourage anybody who's working on the cooling to look through this document, see how it reads today and the matrix, and see where it makes sense to put in other cooling methodologies in terms of, ideas, or if it's a higher density required, this is what we recommend. So we have the ability to modify this, but again, like as you said, it's the level of detail that we're talking about right now. This document's just not really set up for that. We're set up as a very high level and suggestions and direction on design. But yeah, I think we're in a situation where we're going to have to start referencing other documents if people want to go a bit further into the technology. And the idea here is also, let's just get this version done, and then we can start updating it to the other pieces, right? The other new technologies that we're working on and getting set up. So that's the other piece of it is it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the desired one, but we try and get it done so then we can start updating it to the next level.
Okay. I will ping this off the door heat exchanger group, and hopefully I'll work on my access and stuff like that. In terms of, for some reason, I wasn't able to open the links that were you provided previously.
Yeah, and this is something that I was focusing on, the electrical stuff, and look at further up in this document. Until the last month, I hadn't really taken a strong look at the cooling system and realized that, oh yeah, we're really kind of back a few steps from where everybody really kind of wants it to be. So it kind of is what it is at this point. I don't know that we've got, I don't know that you can dramatically change this. Again, the goal would be to get an MDC version done and approved, and then we can start kind of updating it to all the different standards that are being worked on.
So just kind of off the top of your head, Scott, do you see a large footprint of door heat exchanger type modular data centers in the market, or more is it hot aisle, cold aisle in the marketplace?
Oh, I'd still say very much the majority is still this typical hot aisle, cold aisle, air-cooled solutions. We're not getting a big demand at the moment for high densities, but it does come up, right? And so we've looked at liquid cooling solutions. We looked at there are customers that are looking for rear door heat exchangers, so it definitely does come up. But at the moment, I would say it's still pretty typically an air-cooled solution where we're using a lot of DX systems, or for large solutions, more of a chill water or air handler of some sort. But yeah, again, that's not where it's necessarily where it's heading. That's where it is today.
No, and so I'm not sure that a door heat exchanger improves your density capacity anyway, in a environment such as a modular data center. Okay, It may or may not, depending on a lot of. So I'm not pushing it. The area that I do see potential growth, but huge potential growth, is the liquid cooled IT. But to your point, we don't have I don't think we have OCP approved liquid cooled. When I said liquid cooled, cold plate or immersion, or rack-based immersion, I don't think has yet been formalized. There's too much diversity in the methodologies.
That's where I think we have an opportunity to maybe just mention that as it is being reviewed at the moment, but we don't have any direction to provide, at least within this document, as far as the level of detail they're getting here. As my opinion is that it's not really set up yet to go to that level.
Okay. One of the areas of interest, and I apologize, keep talking because I wasn't part of your agenda really, is we are getting interest, the ACF group is getting interest from people that like where OCP is going on the cooling side, may or may not be married with OCP on the OCP rack side, which is kind of an interesting spin. There's specifically Open 19, for example, said they can't work with OCP because Open 19 competes with OCP racks. But when I talked to Archna, she said, they can work. It doesn't have to be all about the rack, which is kind of ironic. That's where OCP started. And I guess where I'm going with this is whether or not we ever see a marketplace where OCP would have a recommendation for a modular solution into which you could plug any type of rack, but not just OCP racks. Kind of a weird where we're going. Just some thought points as we look at expanding and the footprint of what OCP really covers. Do we want to be holistically monopolistic, or do we let people choose which parts they want to use?
Hey Don, this is Raul from Sumner. So just as a side note on this, because this is a really interesting topic, we both support 19 inches and OCP on a, let's say, on a modular, let's say, data center format. So maybe this was a really great strategy to begin with when we started with our product. But we can do both ways, and if OCP itself decides that for modular data centers, this is something that is going to go. I mean, that the focus is not on the OCP rack. We will be there from the beginning, I would say.
So Raul, I appreciate you being there. I didn't notice you, and I should have tagged you sooner. So to that point, Raul would be a great point. Even if we don't, we may never come up with a exact footprint of what or definition of what a immersion tank, OCP rated immersion tank is, but we should recognize that the MDC world is moving toward adding immersion tanks. I don't know, Raul, this is a great, could we come up with a OCP solution that would include a submerged product, MDC solution that potentially could include a submerged product, even if it wasn't a OCP rack or certified OCP rack solution set at that time?
Well, and just to maybe add to that is, I think that what you're talking about is, I mean, just a different standard than what we currently have up here. So this one, the activity here is just to update the guidelines for open compute racks. That's not saying we can't go do something else, right? So that's what this particular standard is. So if we want to, and it's pretty basic, right? It's pretty basic guidelines. But if we want to get into cooling methodology for MDC solutions, or you can specifically submersion cooling, I think that is a different document than this. But again, as you said, I think the community is open to, is interested in that. So that would be my personal suggestion, is that if you guys have some desire to do that, that is a separate document, and specifically could be called, submersion cooling solutions for, MDC deployments, right? Or something to that effect. There's no reason why we can't have multiple reference documents for the customers, again, that are outside this general open compute rack guidelines. So that's what this is. This document is specifically about supporting open compute racks.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
would
think what you're saying is interesting. I just don't think we're the current framework that we're working on right now doesn't include that, but doesn't that by all means, I think that could be a separate document in itself. And ideally, we could have a subgroup that goes off and creates that document and starts the work on that. And I think that's worthy to do as well, as opposed to trying to maybe shoehorn that into this document.
Okay,
Well,
great clarification. And the key thing I am trying to footnote here, and I'm trying to learn myself, is when to pull in other people's documents into my document and vice versa. I don't want to add more work than I have right now. I'm having a hard time keeping up with it. But on the other hand, I don't want to, every now and then I will find a document from, say, Cold Plate that actually references stuff that really should fall under ACF. And I'd like to make sure there's a harmony, that you don't start going and recommending different pipe types and pipe connectors in your MDC solution after we've already made recommendations on pipe types and pipe connectors. Does that make sense?
I doubt we're gonna get that quite detailed anyway, but so I think you're probably safe from at least that standpoint.
Well, no, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and there's another topic in here that I want to discuss about the definition of open rack. I mean, and maybe this is, as you mentioned, shoehorning this whole, let's say, liquid cooling conversation side of this, let's say, white paper or reference or guideline. Sorry. But one of the things that we strive for is to be compliant as much as we can with the open rack specification. Otherwise, we couldn't, let's say, and not only say that we are OCP compliant, but the thing that we strive for is to have an OCP form factor as an OCP compliance as much as we can, or as it makes sense for fully supporting OCP servers inside of our tanks. So I'm not really sure if this can go over the way of saying that in the end we strive for, or we are an open rack for immersion cooling, but maybe this is a far goal, given that we have several players in the immersion cooling space. But that's usually the way we want to go. So considering this, or I'm not really sure how we can fit in there, or we should, let's say, do specific work for a different, let's say, kind of guideline for immersion cooling.
Yeah, and my thought is that it's either if you're looking for immersion cooling as it relates to modular data centers, and that could be something as simple as a 1 or 2 page guideline document separate from this. And then I think I'm not sure the activity that's actually happening at the OCP rack level. You might have more insight to that. But it does seem like that would be potentially the first step, is that getting the cooling solution approved for an OCP rack separate from the facility, separate from the modular data center might make sense. The problem with that is it's not separate, right? Is part of the cooling solutions require involvement from the facility, not just at the rack level. So it's probably not as simple to say that, but again, that's kind of where I'm thinking in terms of the current document that we're working on doesn't cover it, but it doesn't have to be this document. It could be a new document that gets into guidelines for immersion cooling for colo facilities, for MDCs. It could be all inclusive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think
for this document, I almost oh, sorry, Scott.
No,
I was just going to say for this document, I almost envision like a design. I don't know, for lack of a better term, kind of a guideline table, design considerations where we would basically try to, for different types of direct cooling, we would give them. So for example, if you wanted to look at potentially using chilled water, that might be, it's outside the OCP rack, it's direct cooling, but we would give them some pros and cons, and we'd say, okay, for direct cooling, for chilled water, maybe the facility that the MDC is sitting adjacent to has enough chilled water capacity that you could use that. And so that would be a design consideration, and be a pro for depending on your situation for that type.
Yeah,
and I guess in my mind I was almost thinking that.
Yeah, but if you read this first section here, and this defines it pretty well, it basically says this section does not deal with the design of cooling systems external to the room. Each cooling system will have various methods, merits, and features as efficiency, resilience. The aim of this guide is not to prescribe the type of heat rejection system. Rather, it deals with the performance of the cooled air delivery to ensure the user can make an assessment of the facility and review. Now, again, this was written for the data center facility, not the modular. So this is the, this is the data center facility document that we're going to modify for modular deployment. But again, this is the starting point where we're at, is that they're basically defining, say, this is not about discussing the heat rejection system of the data center, is about how to support an OCP rack. So
yeah, but just a comment about this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, even if we are not discussing about the heat rejection system, this document specifically mentions cooled air delivery.
Yes. So it does talk about it. It follows up with the next paragraph. Yeah, the next paragraph gets into densities, and then it talks about airflow per kilowatt, right? So it does have some, discussion of that. I don't think it provides any guidelines. It just references back to the matrix. So it basically discusses considerations, but then it says, the requirements matrix highlights, for instance, so that's the thing, is that, as Mark pointed out to us, if we're going to modify all this, we need to update the matrix. We need to make sure those two things are in conjunction. But again, this is a fairly high level discussion here in terms of how to support the OCP rack, not different cooling methodologies for doing so. It just talks about air cooling and airflow for the rack. So again, that's where I would encourage just reading through this, because the intent is to update this document for MDC specifically, to introduce new cooling methodologies. Again, I think we can make mention of it, and as this discussion talks about here, I think it's worthy to bring that up. But again, I don't know that's the goal of this particular document at this point, is to provide detailed guidelines for design of cooling solutions. It's considerations for an overall MDC design for OCP racks. So again, I just think we have to keep that in mind. But again, I'm open to people looking at this section and making suggestions. Right, that's where I would start with, as opposed to just hearing what I say. Right, take a look at this and see where you think it makes sense to add in comments. But if we get into submersion and liquid cooling methodologies in general, and the benefits that provides, why that makes sense for modular, all those things, I think that it'd make more sense to be a separate document that we reference here and say, okay, for more information on that, reference X document, and then gives you more guidelines for it. Because we're not talking about any other cooling system. We're talking about the benefits of chill water or direct air or any other cooling solution either. So again, if we're going to get into one specific one, I'd say that's a separate document, and we highlight all the benefits of those in that document, and we can reference that document from this one. So anyway, again, my recommendation is take a look at this, see what you think, see where you think we can add stuff in it. But if you agree, if it makes sense, I would highly recommend the team that's got more knowledge on submersion cooling to start working on a separate item that we can, again, get into a lot more greater detail in terms of benefits and why we believe that that's going to be the direction that people are going to go.
Okay, I mean, happy to help you in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. So Bob, we've hijacked this quite a bit, but I think it was a good conversation. I know we're way over the time now.
Yeah, no, it was a very good discussion actually. So let's do this. I will write up the notes. I'll make sure that we get the links, the link to the folder where both the documents, you know, the matrix and the OCP guideline is located. Everybody, let's take a look at that. Make some recommendations on the matrix, and you know, we're scheduled to meet again in 2 weeks, I guess, you know, 2 weeks from yesterday, to talk specifically about the guideline. Let's see if we can come to some conclusions by that particular meeting. You know, again, if we're going to plan to try to present this at the summit in November, we're going to have to make some fairly quick progress on getting the you know, the guideline and the matrix developed, so we have something solid to talk about. So. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks. So
Sounds good.
Good to me, yes.
Very good. Well, guys, thanks for attending. It's good to hear from everybody, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.